We are live on Friday, April 8th, 44 days of war in Ukraine. And this is again Marshall M. Ukraine website, Marshall University, West Virginia. We're very glad and proud to have outstanding speakers this Friday. We are doing it for several weeks, as long as war started, and we are not putting any end date on this. We will be doing it as long as we are needed. And we receive a lot of interesting feedback from all over the place, from all over the world, should I say. And we will go to our first speaker, Philipp Markovich, who is introduced by his friend Stefan Schoeberlein. Please, Stefan.
All right. Thank you so much, Victor. This is the first time in a long time I've actually seen Philipp, so this is wonderful. So allow me to introduce Philipp Markovich, who is a screenwriter and DJ who until recently lived and worked in Kyiv. Philipp grew up in Donetsk and holds a master's degree in German literature, and he wrote a thesis on Günter Grass. Following Russia's full-scale invasion, he had to flee Kyiv and now resides in Lviv, in the west of Ukraine. A few weeks ago, Philipp evacuated his mother and little brother from a small town whose name is now known worldwide, Bucha. Thank you so much for being here, Philipp, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you for introducing me and having me tonight on air. Yeah, where should I start? Most probably with the moment, early morning, 24th of February, when I woke up to my phone, I received a message from Stefan, from which I haven't heard in many years. We know each other from this high school exchange program from 2004 or 5, I guess.
I had to ask my mother. I think it was 2005.
5, all right. Yeah, so we've been living in this kind of sister cities. Me in Donetsk, in eastern part of Ukraine, in Donbass, the city which is now occupied by Russian troops since 2014. And Stefan has been living in city of Bochum in northern Rhine-Westphalia, Germany. So both cities share the same background, being a coal mine cities, yeah, kind of. So that's why maybe these cities became sister cities and made this students exchange program. So anyway, and I haven't heard from Stefan for 10 years, maybe. And then I woke up to his message. Oh my God, is this true what I've seen on news now? Is this war? Yeah, and thanks to Stefan, I haven't missed the beginning of it. I immediately called up my mom. I woke her up, and she was in this kind of state, you know, when you wake up and you don't fully trust what you are being said. And she was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Turn on the TV or go to any news website." And she's like, "Yeah, I've turned the TV, there is nothing." And I go, "Check the Facebook." And then she saw it. Yeah, and my mom and my bro, they've been living in the city of Bucha. You most probably know it now. We've seen the pictures of this massacre in Bucha. This city has been now liberated by Ukrainian troops, but the atrocities which are left behind by Russian occupiers, they are stuck in my heart and my head, and I'm devastated even more because this morning there was another big shelling in city of Kramatorsk. This is a city in Donbass, in eastern part of Ukraine. So Kramatorsk is now substituting Donetsk as a regional center of Donetsk region because Donetsk is occupied, so Kramatorsk substitutes it. And earlier today there was an airstrike on a railway station where people have been waiting for trains to evacuate from this region because they've been asked by the authorities to leave immediately because all the troops which are now stepping out of the northern part of Ukraine, regions of Kyiv, Chernihiv, they are now being relocated to eastern part, to Donbass, to make it a new hotspot on the map of war, I guess. So people have been waiting for trains to evacuate, and the last I've seen on the news, it's like more than 30 dead already and more than hundreds wounded and in hospitals. Yeah, what should I say? I thought that I might be this kind of a role model for this Russian dictator, Putin, because I'm the perfect guy to be part of what he believes to be his dream. I was born in St. Petersburg in Russia, in Leningrad at that time, Soviet times. I'm a Russian speaker in my everyday life, but I'm a bilingual actually. I switched to Ukrainian the moment I hear somebody speaking Ukrainian, but I think in Russian, I speak in Russian, I was born in Russia, I was raised in this eastern part of Ukraine, Donbass, Donetsk, which is now believed to be an independent republic, which is, let me say, not true. And I've been living, so I'm the role model of the people who he wants to liberate, but I don't know what reason he tries me to liberate from myself. You know, I'm a mixed origin. My mom is Russian German, my father is Russian Jewish, and I consider myself a Ukrainian. I grew up here, staying here, and I'm part of this political nation of Ukrainians. Not ethnically am I Ukrainian, but I consider myself Ukrainian, who speaks Russian, even living in Kyiv, who is now being called the capital of Kyiv regime. You know, what does this mean? So, and the only thing when somebody is trying to liberate me or my family or my country this way is, please stop and leave us alone. And forget about this propaganda dreams about Nazis ruling this country or other nonsense being said about it. I don't know what to add to this description of myself. Maybe through some questions I will go further into discussion with you.
Philip, I have a question. I just put it in the chat. First of all, thank you so much for what you've shared so far. It is amazing, and it gives us such an insight. I'm a Ukrainian American. My mother is Latvian. My father's Ukrainian. I'm an American, but I speak Ukrainian, and it's amazing how much we have in common, even though we're so far apart. But what you're giving to my generation who grew up here in America is a real insight into the experience of our peers, our colleagues, our friends, our brothers and sisters who are in Ukraine. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the trip for your mother and your brother to safety. I mean, I cannot even say the name Bucha without crying. And so I can only imagine how this must affect you. Were people kind? Were people helpful? Did you walk? Did you take a car? Was it difficult? What were the challenges in getting your loved ones to safety?
Yeah, I can totally share your feeling now because I've been speaking to this Swedish newspaper recently, this Aftonbladet. They've been asking me about Bucha as well, and I was getting emotional. Yeah, I cannot say this name without being emotional. So what the whole thing happened. So I had 2 attempts to get my mom out of Bucha because you have to understand that Bucha is like this summer cabin-like small suburb of Kyiv, I don't know, 15 miles from Kyiv, maybe 10. And there are a bunch of these small towns, Bucha, Irpin, Gostomel, Borodyanka, and all of them are connected to the northern part of Kyiv through 3 bridges. And this was early morning, February 25th, and I've been with my friend on the car. We've been trying to access Bucha at 7 a.m. because we couldn't make it earlier because there was a curfew. So there's a curfew in Kyiv every night from 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. So the next minute we could start our journey. We went there north, but we couldn't access Bucha from the first attempt because On the crossroads, we've been stopped by Ukrainian soldiers, which prohibited us to enter this road because from that direction, the Russian troops been approaching already, and our troops, our Ukrainian troops, had to explode one of these bridges in order not to let the Russian tanks pass through this bridge. We've been trying to attempt making a detour to go through another bridge which was blocked too. So there was no coming back to Kyiv as well because there was a fight on a city district called Obolon, which was like behind us. There was shellings as well. So we had to get back through the other road. And what else was there to do? I called up my friend living next to Bucha in the city of Irpin. And I knew that he was about to leave Irpin as well. So I asked him whether he has free space in his car to get my mom, because they're like living next door, basically, these two cities, and go not from the south part, which is connected to Kyiv, but other directions through this whole block post made by Russians already, you know. So, and he helped me. So from this second attempt, with the help of my friend living next to where my mom used to live, I could get her and my little teenage brother out of it, and we went west, and people been extremely helpful because you have to imagine that Kyiv is, let me say, 3.5 million people, citizens, big city. So at least the half of it was trying to get out of the city within 2 or 3 first days. Not only Kyiv, but other cities too. And on the way west, we've been joined by tens of thousands of cars, and there was like heavy traffic. And on every village we've been passing through, there were like people living there, villagers going to these crossroads, to these roads, and giving out food, milk, I don't know, water, what else they had. So usually you would spend, let me say, 5 hours by car from Kyiv to Lviv. We've spent 2 days because we had to stop overnight at our friends in a city of Khmelnytsky, in a central western part, because there was this time already where the curfew was in, so we had to stop. But then again, we approached Lviv. Lviv used to be like really big cultural city, but always had less than 1 million citizens. I guess it now has more than 1 million. I'm absolutely sure because it's flooded with people coming from around the country. And in the first days, hundreds of thousands women and children and elderly people been trying to cross the border because men age 18 till 60 are not allowed now because there is a military law now in action here in Ukraine. So mostly women and children, they've been crossing the borders to Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, a little bit to Moldova. So, and there been heavy traffic jam as well on these crossings of the border. And I've spent one night helping out on the Lviv Central trail station because there were like tens of thousands foreign students at that moment trying to leave Ukraine as well. Many of them been coming from cities like Kharkiv in eastern part of Ukraine because it has really big foreign students, especially in economics and medicine fields. So, and all of them been lost, you know. Local people, I mean, Ukrainians arriving at the stations, these students, foreign students, all of them been lost. So I've been helping out, translating there, giving directions, handing out foods and stuff. So, and this was a nightmare. If you ever have seen, you most probably have seen a Hollywood movie about war when people evacuate on a rail train station. You can imagine these pictures, yeah? This is true. people literally lying on the floor, sleeping. Like this seems to be a big mass of people. You know, that was my experience of the first days of full-scale war. I managed to get my mom and my brother over the border. They're now safe in Latvia, hosted by our friends. And I'm here to stay. I'm here to help. Yeah. I haven't been drafted yet, but I help like voluntarily on an everyday basis.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. I was definitely wondering how that what that was like. Thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I can paraphrase Chris's question here a little. So you've been out of Donetsk for a while now, right?
Yeah.
You left before 2014, I would
I've been
assume?
living in Kyiv since 2006.
Yeah. Do you still have contact to Donetsk? Have you heard something from people about life under sort of Russian puppet rule there?
You know what? My mom, she doesn't lose her sense of humor even in these conditions. She says, her name is Olga, and she says she used to be Olga from Donetsk. Now she's Olga from Bucha. So she had to leave Donetsk 2014. At the beginning of the war, at the first attempt of Putin to liberate her from herself. Now she had to leave second time from the city of Bucha. So
you might not want to tell the Latvians this story.
Mm-hmm.
You might not want to tell the Latvians this story.
The
Russian army has followed her from Luhansk to Bucha.
Mm-hmm.
Oy.
Yeah, so anyway, I have my grandparents, only my grandparents there, because I relocated to Kyiv immediately after I finished my high school. I went to the university in Kyiv, so I consider Kyiv to be my hometown and my home base, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I have only connection to my grandparents, and it's always like talks on the weather, so to say. We do not talk about it. They're old. I don't want to hear what they say about it because in 2014, they've been constantly watching Russian propaganda TV. I know what they have to say. I don't want to hear it because this makes no sense at all. This is nonsense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Please, we move to next speaker now, but please stay with us, Philip. And
Sure.
if people have more questions, if we have time, we will ask them. Please put them in chat.
Полезно, точнее, правильно, мы после этой войны сможем жить так, чтобы им было завидно, так как им сейчас завидно, почему они воруют у нас.
Я только что хотел сказать, но вы уже так живете.
Белье и так далее. Я не знаю.
Okay. Someone. Okay. This doesn't matter. Chris, please introduce David.
Vitya, this is my friend Yuri Zayda. He lives in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
He's from Kyiv. He's not going to speak, but I invited him to be with us.
Yes, sure. Please, Yuri, you're welcome. Please, Chris, go on.
Great. Thank you so much. That was incredibly moving and very insightful. And to kind of bridge off of his point, I wanted to ask if, well, first of all, let me introduce our colleague over the border in Athens, Ohio, Dr. David Curp, who's a specialist on Polish history. And he actually was on my podcast a few weeks ago and gave me a lot of great information and insights about the Polish perspective. But welcome, Dr. Curp, first of all.
Very good. Thank you. I'm quite happy to be here, even if the circumstances are so difficult. Oy, couple of things. I was just as I was listening to, I'm sorry, it was Philippe, our first speaker. No, I was thinking about the whole vision of the Ruski Mir, the Russian world, that Putin has been advancing. Can you hear me? Can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'm sorry. And what is striking and disconcerting is how in such a short time there is an increasing radicalization of Russian rhetoric vis-a-vis Ukraine. For instance, just a couple of days ago in Novosti, an article was published talking about the need for long-term, quote-unquote, denazification of Ukraine, to the point that the article was claiming even the name Ukraine needs to be effaced, and we need to start talking about Little Russia and Novorossiya in the south portions of what is today Ukraine. And it was a quite radical article that had a vision of Ukrainian identity as being something created primarily over the last 30 years, but its roots, according to this article, according to other statements by Russian press and political figures, they're arguing the roots of Ukrainian identity are really late 19th, early 20th century and were supercharged by fascism and particularly the Nazis. It is it's an incredible distortion of the history of Ukrainian nationalism, and it speaks to it is trying to tug on some of the deepest fears and anxieties Russians have in their relationship with Western Europe, and certainly it's poisoning the wells there, and so this is Putin's rhetoric alone. Prior to the Monday prior to the invasion, he delivered a speech that again went on for about an hour and contained a great deal of strident anti-Ukrainian, anti-Western rhetoric. But the Novosti article published just a couple of days ago takes it a step further. Also, Dmitry Medvedev, who was, I believe, Russia's president from around 2008 to 2012, and was something of a kind of, if you will, Potemkin liberal figure to try to reach out to the West while the Russian government was trying to ascertain what are its next steps in developing their relations with the West, asserting Russia's agendas. This was right after the Georgian War, when relations had gone into a tailspin, and it seemed that what I would argue is Russia's military failure in Georgia, because it looks for all the world in 2008 as if the Russian army was aiming for regime change, but was not in a position to pull it off. There was this pause in Russia's imperial designs, and Medvedev was put forward as this transition figure, even while Vladimir Putin, as prime minister, still held a great deal of power. Medvedev was something of a liberal, at least presented himself as much, but his statements over the last week are in many ways in accord with this very strident triumphalist vision of Russian national. It's a strange combination of the Russians both asserting, a la Putin, victory is in our genes, it's in our blood, and yet this fear that somehow Russia is being surrounded by predatory powers. It's a remarkable projection of Russia's own agendas onto other countries. And this is Dmitry Medvedev. This is someone who was regarded as, and rightly regarded at the time, as at least presenting a liberal front. The fact that he feels comfortable with this kind of eliminationist, strident anti-Ukrainian rhetoric is deeply disconcerting. So just in terms of, and again, one of the things to keep in mind here. It would be very easy to read the Russian military withdrawal from Kyiv as, and the statements the Russians made out in the midst of these withdrawals, that Russia was ratcheting down its aims in Ukraine, that Russia was simply had quote unquote degraded Ukrainian military potential, in the process losing hundreds of tanks and possibly upwards to 15,000 troops. But the Russians had achieved many of their military objectives in Ukraine as well. But now we're switching to the quote unquote complete liberation of Donbass. And what is interesting and problematic here, and I think we need to pay attention to both rhetoric and activities. The rhetoric is not a rhetoric of de-escalation. The rhetoric is a rhetoric of expanding conflict, of constant, there had even seemed to be in the first couple of weeks, there were some voices in the Russian government who were saying denazification is a task the Ukrainians now must complete. But now there seems to be a switch to a much more strident assault on the very concept of Ukraine as an independent state and people. So this, it seems to me that there is, let's put it this way, there are reasons to think that the Russian government has not yet fully decided what their aims in Ukraine are. That's one possible reading of this disconnect between a rhetoric, if you will, of a more minimalist military approach, quote unquote, just the liberation of Donbass, versus a doubling down on this idea that Ukraine is this kind of center of Nazi revival in Europe that must be crushed as a whole. So this is a very difficult and dangerous time in terms of just understanding, and also even wondering, do the Russians themselves, does the Russian government itself know what it wants? What aims, because the rhetoric is quite confusing, the actions, and here's where I think, here's one thing where I think, I don't so much take issue with it, but in terms of precision, I think we would be better to, we would probably be better served to talk more about mass murder and less about genocide. I do not think that what's driving Vladimir Putin or the Russian campaign in Ukraine is the physical extinction of all Ukrainians. Rather, it is the killing of all Ukrainians who hold to ideals of independence and the quote-unquote reprogramming, the forced reassimilation of Ukrainians into the Ruski Mir, into this Russian world, where unfortunately the Ukrainians can look forward to a future similar to what the Chechens are experiencing now, where there is a hope for a Ukrainian Kadyrov, and Chechens are now being used as cannon fodder in Ukraine. So trying to understand what Russia's aims in Ukraine are is somewhat important, but it seems to me to be something of a moving target. And this is a very dangerous time, and I think that it is something of a mistake to try to calculate or calibrate our policies in a way that we can delude ourselves into thinking, well, we're avoiding escalation by doing X, Y, or Z. I don't think we can avoid escalation because escalation is partly in Russia's and Putin's hands. And he has already demonstrated in his rhetoric that he thinks of himself at war with the West. The Russian government has made very clear they regard sanctions, the current sanctions they're under, and that was even almost a week before a new tranche of sanctions has opened up, as the equivalent of an act of war. Therefore, it is not in our power to control the escalation of this conflict. We should be choosing policies that accord with our interests and values. And I would argue that in both of those cases, our interests and values point towards a deep need for Ukrainian success on the battlefield and a peace, whatever negotiated peace that emerges, leaving Ukraine largely intact, defensible, and also with very limited reintegration of Russia back into the Western portions of the global economy. Russia has demonstrated dangerous levels of irresponsibility, and to my mind, we need to back you. It is in the West's interest as well as Ukraine's that we support them on the battlefield and in the negotiations that unfortunately will have to ensue, barring a revolution in Russia, which I would not be counting on. Mr. Putin is almost certainly never going to be brought to book as a war criminal. He ought to be. He almost certainly will not be. But we need to consider our interest. We cannot control escalation. We need to make it into the interest of the Russian government to de-escalate. And then I would finally add, not just for our sake, not just for Ukraine's sake, as legitimate as those are, even and perhaps especially for Russia, that if there is any country that cries out for, I don't think of the Russian government as Nazis. They have a much more expansive, they have a different vision of identity and the like, but it is fascistic. And a Russian victory, or even a kind of golden parachute that allowed Russia to make many gains with minimal damage, would be a disaster for the West, for Ukraine, and for Russia.
Thanks so
that would be
much.
my take on the situation now.
Yeah, thank you so much for breaking that down, Dr. Curp. I actually have a previous guest from last week who is a major in the United States Army who spent considerable time over in Poland and in the Baltic states in the past few years. He actually sent some questions to me because he is actually out with an injury right now. He wanted to be on here so he could ask questions personally. But he had this question about the difference or kind of the he wanted to know if you could talk about Poland's role in NATO versus Central Europe in terms of their interests vis-a-vis Russia.
Yeah, the Poles, and again, something we talked about in our podcast, Polish governments have been and Polish society has been deeply divided for decades over their own internal problems and issues. And yet one thing that has united Poland is, since the mid-1990s, even when a left-wing post-communist government was in power in Poland, was a growing apprehension about the growth of Russian aggression and imperialism. So I think that the Poles have been, and other the Baltic states, Poland, have been saying for decades, Russia is a great problem. You continue to ignore even flagrant acts of aggression by the Russians. You're rewarding them. And that has been done again and again. And so Poland has a good regional understanding with the Visegrad group of Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, even Hungary sometimes though that's been more difficult because Hungary under Orban has pursued a more pro-Russian policy than most of the Visegrad group feels comfortable with. But on the whole, Poland has been playing an important leadership role regionally, preparing for possible Russian aggression and then trying to urge the EU, especially Germany, to take even the most basic prudent steps. And the EU itself has talked about things like diversifying energy resources, something they pledged to do several years ago and did not follow through on. Instead, they became hugely dependent on Russian energy resources in ways that have left them vulnerable and makes the situation now where Russia's war machine and economy is still being fed by the EU. Poland has seen that play out for many years, and now the Poles have some traction for those arguments. And certainly they are further cementing their leadership role regionally, and have done as much as I think they can for Ukraine. So, but there are limits. Poland is at best a regional power. Poland has certainly invested heavily in its military. It has seen what's coming for a while. But ultimately, it is countries like France and Germany that need to assume more of a leadership role. And Germany still wobbles, even though we'll see what the impact of Bucha and other Russian atrocities in Ukraine will be. This seems to be starting to further the move to Germans to realize that they can't simply turn a blind eye. So yeah, Poland has played a huge has played an outsized role, has punched above its weight, but has now started to hit the limits of its ability to affect change. Now you need the EU to actually start functioning in ways that that I would argue are more related to self-preservation than simply asserting its values. And we'll see if the Germans and the French can avoid the song of their inner lemmings and the appeals of sort of cheap resources to start doing what is necessary. That would be my answer. Poland has played a huge role. Poles and the Baltic states especially have great intelligence resources, good local contacts, things that can help us support Ukraine significantly. We have to make decisions about how far we, in terms of major Western powers, are willing to go to help the Poles and other regional players succeed.
Thank you, Dr. Curp. Victor, did you want to ask any questions?
Not immediately. I think questions should be asked by our guests, if possible, if they want, in chat. But I thank Dr. Curp. It is extremely interesting, and all these details, obviously, not known to most Americans here about the East European policies. We would like to welcome now our third guest. We have 4 speakers today. Semyon Yefimovich Reznik. Semyon Reznik, my friend, older friend, one of the best Russian expat writers in the United States, I must say, novelist, a journalist, historian of science. As a kid, I read his books, biographies of great scientists, and there is much more. We could make a special broadcast with Semyon. But I invited him today with us to say something about Russia, the aggressor, the regime, the future, whatever. I have plenty of questions if we have time, but whatever you can tell us, Semyon, today, because things in history have been changing dramatically every second. Please.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see the picture, so I cannot show, or I can. I would like to show this cover of my book that was printed in 1991, 30 years ago. The title is "Красное и коричневое," which means the red and the brown. This is book about the evolution of Russian thinking after the communist ideology actually was lost all this credibility in the mind of Russian people. While some of Russians became more and more Western-oriented people, became more and more liberal people who dreamed of joining the civilized world. There was another branch of Russian thinking the turn red ideology, I mean communist ideology, into Nazi ideology, into fascist ideology. This was, I had personal contacts with these people when before my immigration, and I realized how dangerous it is. And unfortunately, this, well, it's understandable that after the crash of Soviet Union and all this has happened and Cold War was over, the mainstream Western thinking was that this now everything is fine. We are going now to new world without this wars, without we will embrace Russia. But this wave of brown part of Russian mentality, Russian social thinking, was overlooked mostly in the West. In 1996, mostly based on this book, I published a book in English, The Nazification of Russia. Denazification of Russia. I would read you two epigraphs from this book. First one. At 1993 parliamentary election, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, I will not explain now who it is, doesn't matter in this context, discovered weak spot in our society, the very presence of which we had never suspected. And one of them is the lack of immunity against fascism. 1993. This word was, it was said by President of Russia at the time, Boris Yeltsin. Another epigraph from Sergei Sirotkin, who was deputy chairman of Yeltsin's Human Rights Commission, and he testified here in Washington in House of Representatives. Discrimination, racial and ethnic prejudices, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism had spread around the country to such an extent that they influence the country's social life. These extremist organizations and their ideas penetrate Russian trade union, businesses, the armed forces, and law enforcement agencies, and spread quickly among migrants, workers, and students. Xenophobia and anti-Semitism in Russia are not just a reality, but a growing reality. That was what's said here in the House of Representatives. It mostly was overlooked. And now the main tragedy of Ukraine, from my point of view, is that she has to fight on two fronts. Two fronts. We know, we talk mostly about one front, but President Zelensky are fighting on another front. His speeches here in Europe, in European Union, in our Congress, in United Nations, we all heard them, we applaud him. Actually, we do very little from this front to help them. My big conviction is that if President Biden, before this invasion started, told in few words to Mr. Putin, stop it, we will not allow it, Putin would not invade Ukraine this time. But we know that President Biden said not to Putin. He said to Zelensky, please come here, I will help you to leave Ukraine. And we know what President Zelensky answered. I don't need taxi, I need arms. Ukrainian people, you know, I saw yesterday a small vision from Brooklyn, New York. Some Jewish organization, Russian Jewish organization, immigrants, organized some kind of fund and some kind of woman, pregnant woman, young pregnant woman, worked 20 hours a day to help Ukrainian to live, to help them, to make them, to send them medicine, to send them something, equipment, something to live them. In these people, the Jewish people, they said, we are now Ukrainians. We all now are Ukrainians. And I can say that 30 years I am writing about Russian anti-Semitism, but now I am more Ukrainian than a Jew. This is what I want to say. We have to do something to press our United States government to do more. Zelensky asks for airplanes. Give them. Here I am agree absolutely with. Unfortunately, I did not recall your name. You said I absolutely agree. We do not control the expansion of this war. We do not provoke Putin. He don't need our provocation. He can use something, and he is using all the stuff. But we cannot stop him. Only one thing he understands: force. And we have to give Ukrainian, at least if we don't want to use our force directly, give them. They are dying. They are living there 4 million, as I know, left already Ukraine, and 6 million refugees inside Ukraine. And maybe even more now, because it's this is figures of 2 or 3 days ago. So this we have to do something here in this country to force our government to do. They are fighting for us, not only for themselves. If we don't want to have this really, how far Putin will go? How far? What is in his mind? He will go as far as we would allow him to go. He will not stop in Ukraine. He will go further if we let him do it. So this is what I wanted to say. My speech is not long enough. We have time always almost expired. So this is my main message that I want to say to everything. We are Americans, and we are responsible for what is going on there, because we have the power to help them. I don't think that Latvia or Estonia have enough power to help Ukrainians, but we have this power. If we should not limit this, we have to do everything that we can in order to, first of all, to stop the bloodshed, and then to remove all Russians from Ukraine, and let them themselves decide inside Russia how to fight their inside fascism and Nazism inside Russia. We have a lot of friends. Victor I have a lot of friends in Russia, very nice, very talented, very brilliant intellectuals who are against this war. Some of them speak this out, some of them don't, because there might be consequences that they are not ready to accept. But there are people there. We have to help them, Russians as well as Ukrainians, to fight this fascism Nazism, how to, you call it this, Ruski Mir, this. They call it now Ruski Mir, Russian world. So we have to do something about it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Semyon. Thank you
Question, I am open to it.
deeply for your patient speech. We need more of those. We indeed are in unique position. And if I may say a couple of words from myself before calling Boris, our last presenter. This war is lasting for 45 days. We don't know when it will end and how. Some say it might become Third World War. I don't think it matters what you call it. It is Russian war. It is a war of Putin's Russia against the world. That's what it is. In Russian, it sounds even better term, Russo Всемирная война. That's what I tell everyone. And it will not end until this regime in Russia is disassembled, toppled. We may have different hopes. I have heard Americans telling me that this will fail and Ukraine will fail. And people are comparing Ukrainian fight right now to 300 Spartans. But my friend from Kyiv, from under bombardment, told me that this is not exact comparison because Leonidas knew they were going to die. And Ukrainians know they will survive and win. So this is a good formula for this moment. And Putin's army is regrouping. They want to carve out Novorossiya in the south. And I think the beautiful city where my father was born, Odessa, is now under the greatest threat. It might be next major target, which we do not know, but it is open to the sea. I hope Ukrainians can protect it, but if Odessa falls, Putin will have his corridor from Transnistria, from Prидnestrovia to Crimea, to Kherson, to Donbass, to Mariupol. This is quite possible. I have seen all this strange news about Turkish ships and Greek ships and Greek convoys. We are back to Byzantine Empire. This area have seen conquerors for thousands of years. And what you're looking at in live TV right now is something, some evil resurrected from Middle Ages, from ancient Persia. It is not modern. It has modern gadgets and modern arms, but it is absolutely archaic evil. It's murder. That's what it is. Boris Chertkovsky, my friend, is joining us from Charleston, West Virginia, a capital of our beloved state. And he is a representative of a very interesting minority Ukrainian community of West Virginia. Boris is from Odessa. Please, Boris, you have microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody. A little bit about myself. I was born in Odessa, Ukraine, in 1955, so I'm 67 years old. Up to age of 40, I lived in Ukraine. I have an engineering degree. I work in Kharkiv. I work in Donbass area. I work in Uglegorsk. Work in other small towns. In Donetsk, I was part of building construction Chernobyl power plant and Yuzhno-Ukrainskaya power plant. Then I worked in Odessa, then had my own company. In 1995, we moved to the United States. My identity is my father is Jewish, my mother is half Russian and quarter Ukrainian, quarter Polish. As my last name suggests, Chertkovsky, we traced my ancestry probably from Ukrainian city of Chertkov, what was Poland, then Ukraine, then who knows what it was. And my grandfather, his name Berezovsky, he is from Kremenets. So when I grown up, Odessa is a strictly Russian-speaking city. You could hear Ukrainian primarily in farmers market when people would bring some products. Basically, division was people from city, they were Russian-speaking, people from countries that were Ukrainian cities. So as a Russian-speaking guy, we always look little down to Ukrainians who bring food to our table. Of course, I changed my mind then. I never forget when we come to United States, we came with Ukrainian passport. Actually, it was a passport USSR because Ukraine at that time did not make a blanks of passport, but it was a stamp of Ukraine. And a couple years after that, our son watching Mexican flag in house, our neighbor said, "Dad, why we never put our flag?" And I got confused because I couldn't figure out what flag would be mine because we didn't come from Russia, so Russian flag would be ours. Our culture actually was not Ukrainian because we spoke Russian and we always knew that Moscow was our capital. So we were not Ukrainians and we were Soviets, what country doesn't exist any longer. So we dropped this question. We had no flags. You'll see my house outside and my truck and Natasha's car. We have Ukrainian flags everywhere. And what happened, when we come to the United States, we got sucked into the regular immigrant question, problems like a growing family, finding a job, making the meat and everything. I got pretty interested in Russian, Ukrainian politics probably since 2002, 2003. I started listening Radio Moscow, Echo Moscow, and I was listening Radio Svoboda. And first I liked Putin, but then I noticed that some strange characters, for example, never understood his way to win war in Chechnya. I noticed that there was some dark spots in that process. But my simple way of thinking was, well, war is stopped. Who cares how he did that? Well, now I understand that the price and methods to achieve the goal is very important. And then I remember this, how they call it, rokirovka, when Putin served 2 terms being president, then Medvedev became a president, and 2012, Putin became president again by simply adding one word in Constitution, would say not more than 2 terms consequentially. And then I realized there is something terribly wrong with this system. And there was some closing of liberal TV stations. People start going exile, then Khodorkovsky's story. And I started watch what's going on in Russia very close. And same time, I was watching things in Ukraine. And I had more and more sympathy to Ukrainians. And then I start reading history books, and I start learning that Ukrainians and Russians are not quite the same. And I think that hundreds of years of slavery in Russia and a lot less of slavery in Ukraine probably play some role forming Russian mentality. And things what going on in Russia probably could not happen in Ukraine. An Orange Revolution and then Revolution of Dignity, it's Ukrainian stuff, it's not Russian stuff. And more and more I start feeling sympathy to Ukrainian cause. I start have more interest in Ukrainian language. And I remember this shock what happened when there was a annexation of Crimea. And at that time, I had a gut feeling that it's not going to stop there. And there was a Crimea, then it was a Donetsk and Lugansk, and then eight years of constant war. So war didn't start in February 24th. War started 8 years ago. And if Crimea was simply missed by Ukrainian army intervened when Russians came to Donetsk and Lugansk. And Ukrainians at that time, without arms, having probably more than 50% of Russian spies in a leadership of Ukrainian army, they still beat Russians. That's why these rebels could not capture all Lugansk territory and all Donetsk territory. Mariupol was a great example how Russian rebels cut it and then they kicked out. So when February 24th happened, long time ago, I had two very tragic events. It was a quite bad illness for a younger boy, and we weren't sure if he survived or not. And I thought it was biggest tragedy of my life. Then my father passed away. I was shocked. But in February 24th, it was a short shock. And I thought that there's a three worst event happened in my life until Bucha happened. And then bombardment of Kramatorsk railroad station. And there's no stop to it. No stop. I would like to talk a little bit about refugees, because there is a refugee crisis in Ukraine. A few days ago, there was more than 4 million people, and there's a little personal stories. In Odessa city, my wife has a little apartment, what we never maintain to sell. It doesn't worth much money, maybe $20,000, $30,000. And we allow Natasha's aunt, 85 years old, Natasha's cousin, about 50 years old, her daughter, about 30, and grandson is year and a half. They were living in this apartment, and then when war started, they were experiencing siren every night about potential bombardment. There was some explosion heard, so they had to sleep in very small corridor away from windows because they were afraid of shelling and potential shatter of the glass may kill you. And after 4 or 5 nights like that, they decided to escape. Well, we had a very distant relatives in Poland, and it was greatest thing that we maintained relationship with these people, and they accepted the relatives. So instead going straight to Lviv, as they would normally drive in peaceful time, they had to go through Transnistria, then went through Moldavia, then Romania, then Hungary, then Slovakia, and then in 5 days they ended up in Poland. And the lady who was driving it was a small vehicle, so 4 people, dog, cat, and this lady, she was not experienced driver. How she made it in 5 days, who knows? But in the 5th day, old lady failed, broke her hip and broke arm into two spots. So fortunately, Polish government provided all necessary medical help, and she had expensive surgery. Now she's in good shape and she's recovering. Well, and it's kind of human nature, but they were very happy be away from war zone, be away from potential bombing. But the people who accepted them and let them stay are regular people. They are farmers, had own routine. And after a few days, there was a little bit of tension in the kitchen because there is instead of 1 woman were host of the kitchen, now like 4 women host of the kitchen. So now they rent in very small house. They had to use a coal stove to cook, coal stove to heat the house. And they're very happy. And we start filling application for them to become refugees and potentially come to United States. But still, we're not sure how it's going to go because youngest lady has a husband who that time he's in Indian Ocean. He works as a mechanic in a merchant ship. And they're afraid to come back because of war. But we're not sure how beneficial for them would be to come to United States. This group because it's not, they don't speak English, and it'd be very difficult life. Plus, there is another aspect. Last week, we had a meeting, organization called West Virginia for Refugees. West Virginia has an organization what maintain refugees and invite refugees to West Virginia. West Virginia is a state where population is shrinking every year. So West Virginian government tried to do whatever's possible to bring people in. Well, unfortunately, during Trump administration, amount of refugees allowed in this country shrunk from 125 in first year, then 80, then 60. Last year of Trump administration, there was 18,000 refugees allowed. That's why this West Virginia committee simply stopped existence. Now they try to resurrect because Biden now has 125,000 refugees allowed to this country. And then we've heard that Trump allowed 100,000 Ukrainians come to this country. But nobody understands, is it part of 125,000 or it is extra? It's still unknown. Plus, to become a true refugee, according to United Nations criteria, there is many tests need to be passed, and it will take probably a year till someone apply to become a refugee in the United States to the point that the United States will allow them to come in. And it's not clear if these people would allow to come before getting refugee status, or maybe they have to wait somewhere. But we understand that Poland and other European countries are overwhelmed with people. I don't know how long they're going to maintain this crowd. So in my opinion, the United States should allow people to come in and then process and give him some temporary refugee status. But here's another story. We have a friends in Kyiv, older lady, and her daughter, not married, 45 years old, and lady about 70 years old. They were experienced shelling. They were in an area was bombarded, and some buildings were destroyed. So they spent several nights in a basement, and they were afraid to go out. So my wife Natasha, she managed to find some people, some volunteers in Kyiv through internet who agreed to pick them from basement and deliver them to railroad station. And it happened. It's amazing what we can do, even being in West Virginia, how much we can help to people in Kyiv, in a war zone. And we should always remember that we have lots of power. We just don't realize we have it. But we do have. It's little bit of efforts, little bit of learning, and we can help people. It's probably a matter of life and death. But then these two women traveled 25 hours to Poland through Lviv. They were standing. They could not go to restroom. How they managed this, we don't know. But they ended up in Poland. Our people who we find in Poland, they met them in the railroad station, let them stay for 2 days somewhere, and then we found them a place to stay in Belgium, Brussels. They have a choice to go in France, England, Belgium, and some other countries. So they had some criteria. They choose to be in Belgium. So now he's in Belgium. What is a great thing. Problem is they don't speak French. They apply for some kind of refugee paperwork, and it may take forever, and they don't know what to do. They have a very little amount of money, and it's another story. The third story I would like to mention, from mid of December to mid of January, we took a little girl from city of Sumy, from Ukraine. She was from orphanage home. And there was a group of 25 kids what Americans take to stay, just to provide warmth, provide some love, because and we were part of this program. We paid for transportation, we bring this, so some company brought these kids in, and this girl stayed with us from mid-December to mid-January, and then she returned back to Sumy. And then when war started, there was a couple of buses that took all kids from orphanage home, and they took them to Poland, and from Poland they ended up in Germany. And what is great, they're already in school. And I have no words how to praise German government. I know German schools are very good, but somehow they place all kids in school now. I'm not sure how they communicate, but kids learn foreign language quickly. And I would say it's a good story. And maybe these kids would be adopted. But in actuality, we're going to lose a lot of people from Ukraine. These kids belong to Ukraine. Of course, they would find whatever best for them. But if not this war, maybe some Ukrainian family will adopt them. Especially now, losing so many people, every Ukrainian soul matters. And it's another problem. We probably have to deal with that problem later. And sometimes I catch myself that not considering myself Ukrainian a long time ago and living in the United States for 27 years, I start thinking Ukrainian. I feel like a part of my mentality and part of my soul, what is Russian, is kind of contaminated. It's like I have a cancer in this organ in my heart, and I would like to get rid of it. Literally. I catch myself that now I say quite often to myself, we are Ukrainians. What are you going to do with Ukraine? Because now more and more I feel it's my country. It's my motherland. And I think this revelation, many people go through. We came from kind of ignorance and focusing on our problem, but now we understand that Ukraine is our problem, and it's American problem. And I agree with everybody who spoke before me. Like if we would try to solve this problem in 2014, when Putin annexed Crimea, if we would cut its hand, it would cost us small fraction of what we pay now. And every day of delay supplying heavy weapon, cost of this war go exponentially, not only dollar-wise, but human life-wise. And this was very critical. Every minute of delay supplying heavy weapon, cost goes up. And we do whatever we can. We donate money to different organizations. I work for Toyota company, and we have a program what call it Toyota for Goods. And Toyota matches contribution to different charities. And it started months ago. There was a 300 companies related to Ukrainian cause. Now it's 3,500 companies related to Ukraine. So we donated companies, they call it body armor and helmets. There is some company would supply food, but some company would supply medical supplies. Our older son, he's 35. He's a physician assistant, and he lives in upstate New York. He collected 10 duffel bags of different medical supplies, and next week in April 14th, he's going to fly to Poland. And because a lot of his supply is insulin, and it required to be kept at a low temperature. And he's afraid to send it by parcel, so he's going to deliver it to Poland. And that Victor gave us connection, and he's going to transfer this medical supplies and go back. If he would have problems, he would go to Ukraine, and he would try to find a hospital who need that. So we're not sure. Of course, we're extremely worried about what's going to happen. It's not an easy trip to do. It's quite dangerous. But I hate what he's doing, but I'm very proud of what he's doing. I'm very, very proud.
Спасибо. Thank you, Boris. Can I stop you for a moment? Because we have a Ukrainian guest from Germany.
Yeah.
It's late there. Ludmila. Ludmila is from Sumy. She fled with her family to Sumy, and she's right here. She's scientific editor. Ludmila, if you feel comfortable to speak English or Russian, I will translate, whatever you want.
English.
English, да.
Hello. Thank
Yes,
you for inviting me, Victor and Alina Zapalska, to a meeting. I'm not actually an editor. I'm director of the scientific publisher. We publish 8 journals in economics, which are indexed in Scopus, and this is the only one publishing house which is is a member of Curp in Ukraine, and we feel really huge support from Crossref, Curp these days, and from our editors and authors. I will tell a couple of minutes about my say some words about history of my family. My parents are from Kursky region, and my father. My mother was born in Kazakhstan. Her parents are from St. Petersburg. I was born in Moscow when my mother was a student of Moscow State University. And my father was in military service, this time in Moscow too, at the same time. When all our family moved to Sumy, Sumy is 30 kilometers from border with Russia. It's really close. It's up Kharkiv. And I studied in my high school in Moscow. This called the name of the school, Kolmogorov School. This is press school, like school internat of Moscow State University. There were all children of the territory of Soviet Union, from Krasnoyarsk, from Kazan, from everywhere, from Ukraine, from Kazakhstan. And I have a lot of friends from school, and we talk nowadays. I feel the huge support nowadays, and it's really good news that the educated people understand what's going on, even if they live in Russia. They against the war, they support Ukraine, and they trying to do what they can to do. And this is the short story of my family and how it starts in 24th of February. We actually we expected that this can happen but we didn't want to believe, because we live in this 8 years with the war in our country. But we have we had people who expected the war in the city and people who didn't want to believe. My family was the one who expected. That is why we understood that we are 30 kilometers from the border, and we need, if the war will start, we need more. We need to drive more than 1,000 kilometers, and that is why we bought the petrol to the canister. We had all the cars were full of petrol for last month, because we expected that this can happen. But I didn't sleep this night. From 3 a.m. I heard something, but I heard something every night, and I just didn't want to believe. And I got the phone call after 4 from a friend of mine from Belopolye. It's much closer to the border, and she told me that they heard. I even heard on the phone how the artillery was working, and the sound was just on the phone. And from this moment, we just started to call everybody, our relatives, friends, to inform that the war started. And as we expected, all my documents, they were all packed. All my necessary stuff was ready for 1 month before. But when the war started, I understood that I am lost, I am like paralyzed or something like this, and we just couldn't decide during the first hour that we should to leave, because we lived in one street with my parents. My husband's parents, they lived in Sumy too, and I forgot to tell that mom, my husband's mother, she has Russian passport. She is Russian from Georgia, and she lived in Sumy for 40 last years, and she's supposed to leave the city with Russian passport to go to Europe to her daughter. This is how Russia helps Ukraine. Even people with Russian passport should leave. And all our family speaks Russian. Almost all cities speak Russian language. But Putin was going to save Russian language, and what he did, he just destroyed it. From the 24th, I just hate it. I'm trying to talk with my kids, with my family on Ukrainian. We started to study, we started to write, to read on Ukrainian. Because you know what I mean. And what happened on 24th, at 6 a.m. we understood that we can't leave because the tanks, the troops, Russian troops, the techniques already were in the entrance to the city, and I called my friend to Kyiv, and I had some friend from Zhytomyr, and they told me that the road is already stuck. It's just, it was impossible to go because all Ukraine was attacked from to Kyiv to Zhytomyr, and we just didn't understand at this moment which way is safe for us. But we discussed for last month if we will leave, how we will leave the country, and we realized that we can't go to Kyiv because of course the Kyiv will be under attack too. And if you imagine the map of Ukraine, Dnieper, it's a really huge river in the middle of Ukraine, and it's has around 50 bridges to cross the river, and we need Philipp, how many? And we just realized that we need to get to the closest bridge to cross the river. And we decided to stay in the city. At 10 in the morning, we got the call from our friends. We lived in our own house with the basement, and our friends asked to move to our house. In the evening, this were 3 families, 6 adults and 7 kids, and this is how we lived for 10 days in the basement in Sumy, and the tanks were in the middle of the city on the 24th, on the first day, and the Russian soldiers, they are just walking by through our on our street, and after 20 minutes on the same street, Ukrainian soldiers were coming again with javelin. We're trying to catch the tank, but this was the last day when we saw the Ukrainian army. We stayed with territorial defense with the city, and from the 24th, the city was in the ring. Russians started to destroy bridges around Sumy. All roads were closed with Russian block posts, and we couldn't leave the city. But on the seventh day, the city was attacked every day for 5 times per day. I got a message from my colleague one morning. She wrote, I can't work today because house of my parents is destroyed this morning. Finally, they were survived, but her grandmother wasn't. And next night, an energy station was attacked, and we were out of energy, mobile communication, out of internet, and then water, and then heating, and it was -10, and we decided that we just can't stay and we need to leave, and we were trying to find the way to leave the city. And Russians have the same positions for 2 days, and some people who left the city, they found the way to leave, and we were trying to. This was through small villages where no road. It was just no green corridors. It just for your own responsibility, and we were trying to live this way. But when we all packed, we got the call that it's already impossible because they changed position. Then we were trying to leave the other day. We had the commandant hour from 6 morning till 6 evening. We decided to leave at 6 morning, but we were attacked from the air at 5 a.m. and this day was impossible to leave too. And we decided to go next day, and again they changed their positions, and this way was closed too. We talked to territorial defense what to do. They gave us instructions how to behave if we will meet the soldiers, the tanks, how kids should be packed. I have 3 kids, 5, 9 and 11 years old. We gave them money for each one to the pocket, the certificate of birth, the numbers of relatives in different countries in case if they will stay alone. They were all set in very warm clothes because we were if you don't get into the city till the commandant hour, nobody will let you into the city after commandant hour starts. So we could stay on the road for a night, for example, or something else. We just woke up in the morning and understood the positions was changed, and we started to call everybody to the villages, to our friends, to figure out which way is safe. And then 10 cars left the city, and when we called, we have Nedrigailov, the small city near Sumy, and the citizens told us that tanks is already in the city, and this was the only way to leave. And we were waiting in the forest till the first part of tanks will leave the city, and when we got the call that we can go, and we just drive fast till the second part of the tanks. It was the huge column, about 100 tanks. We went through the city, and finally got to Cherkasy. It's about 260 kilometers from Sumy, but we drive 10 hours. And this was the first step of surveillance, and on the third day we got to the border with Romania, and people, they're just incredible, because when the guy from Kharkiv find out that my parents are out of petrol in the car. We had diesel car and they have petrol. That is why it's much more difficult to find petrol. He told us that I will get to my location, took the petrol with what will be left in the car, and bring you by foot where you will stop. It was about 40 kilometers to that city. We spent 20 hours on the Romania's border. The line was so huge for the cars and for people who crossed the border without car. It was the average time of waiting was for 8 hours. It was 10 degrees. The kids and women, they just waiting for the line, and the Romanian people were really incredible. The guys from the border, from the customer, they were carrying the luggage. They were helped as much they can. Nobody checked our luggage. They just checked the documents, that's all, and everybody just wanted to help. And during these 20 hours on the border, we were watching how the families get separated. It's very, it's hard to see. And my family, my husband could leave the country because we are a family with 3 kids. The law allowed the families to leave, the men with 3 kids to leave the country. This is our story.
Thank you. Thank you, Spasibo, Lyudmila. It's incredible. I think everyone here is as grateful as we all are. And we're recording all this, and I hope many more people will see and hear your and Philipp's stories and everything we see today. Thank you. If we have any questions to any of people who spoke today, and everyone is still here, please ask them voice or in chat. Please. I see the message from Philipp that there are 31 bridges over Dnieper River.
In the meantime, I wanted to make a quick note that even while we are surrounded by this amount of horrible stories right now, which I was not even going to tell about the neighbors in Bucha, my mom, we should leave it. You can find all the text, for example, already said by me on my Facebook page. But what I wanted to say, I'll tell you this, even in this super hard time, we're not losing our sense of humor here in Ukraine. I have to say it. Like, we've been talking about like Americans hesitating to ship weapons to Ukraine. There's this joke now that while this time when Americans, NATO, Germans hesitate to ship to fighter aircraft to Ukraine, Ukrainian volunteers already purchased one and looking for an option to ship it overseas to Ukraine. That's how it works now. We are so united as never before. And there's the second joke, just about it, that after we win, after the victory, we should install in every major city of Ukraine a gilded statue of Putin as a godfather and creator of the Ukrainian nation. We will never unite as today. You know what? And the last joke about this withdrawal of Russian troops from northern part of Ukraine and regrouping to eastern part of Ukraine, and how the aims are interchangeable. Yeah, there's this kind of chart, by Russian propaganda saying like step number 1, we have to denazify Ukraine. 1 week later they say we have to conquer Kyiv. 1 week later they say we maybe withdraw our troops. Then 10 more steps, and the last one is like we never want Moscow to be our capital. We are very happy that it is now part of Sumy region.
Yes.
Спасибо. Thank you very much, Philip. Boris, I think maybe you wanted to say a few more words. Maybe something about Odessa.
Yes. I have I had 4 friends in Odessa. Well, 2 of them ended up very pro-Putin people, and I cut them off. At this time of my life, if someone categorically, aggressively does not condemn Putin, I cannot communicate with them. There is some people who say, like my daughter-in-law, she from Vladivostok. My son went to Vladivostok, got married, brought her in. She lives here. Her parents came 4 times to America. They like America. They like everything here. They were thinking maybe relocating to the United States someday. When war started, I noticed they stopped calling us. And I called my, I don't know who, what, my father of my daughter-in-law. I called him and said, hey, Nicholas, what you guys doing in my land? He said, well, I'm not much in politics. I really don't know what's going on. And then he said that, you know what, I don't like killing, but there is someone hit our nations together, and I know who these people are. I said, who? Anglo-Saxons. Well, it was end of story. Then I start sending some videos of what Russian troops did to us, and his wife, mother of my daughter-in-law, she said, I have no desire to see it anymore. And so, like 2 people in Odessa, they're still waiting for Russians. One lady sent us an audio recording from church. She is very religious, and she goes to Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. And they were openly saying that it's not a war between Russia and Ukraine, it's a war between good and homosexuality. Matter of fact, we have a Russian Orthodox Church here in West Virginia. What my wife and my mother-in-law, they went for 15 years. And these people still praise Patriarch Kirill because he is officially legal head of American Orthodox Church abroad. And this church is out of picture. Well, another lady from Odessa, one lady, she, after whole months, she decided to go to Greece, and she joined her daughter in Greece. One lady, she lives in like a bedroom community, many homes and just all bedrooms. And about a week ago, there was a rocket attack to Odessa refinery, and Russians destroyed some storages for gasoline or petrol storage. I don't know exactly what it was. And I asked her if she heard that because it was an opposite side of city. She said, yeah, it was extremely loud. Said people who lived around this, they, all of them lost glasses, windows. There was a huge explosion. And I asked, hey, Zhenya, her name is Zhenya, is it any military installation around your homes that you should be afraid that Russians try to bomb them? And she said, well, I cannot talk that. I said, okay, I understand. And I thought it was the second day after Boris Johnson said that he's going to protect Odessa and he's going to send Harpoon rocket systems, what should take care of these 11 ships. And she said, Zhenya, don't worry about it. Boris Johnson promised it will be here soon. He said, you believe it or not, it's already here. it's already installed, it's already maintained. And I enjoyed that because in the past, Biden and other American officials, they would prepare Putin, hey, we're going to supply this, we're going to supply that. And now I think they stop that. They supply first, and then they say, hey, we will do that. It's already there. And it's a good news. I think it's how we learn. As Americans, how we learn how to deal with Russia.
We have to hope. Thank you, Boris. Everything is extremely moving today, moving in all senses, moving fast and moving speeches and all that. Ludmila, especially thanks to you and all the best to your family. I have your email, and Ludmila was introduced to us by Alina Zapalska, who is Polish by extraction, and she is former Marshall Professor of Business, by the way. And Alina is not with us right now, but I hope we will continue this contact. And if you need anything, we are all ready to help. Ludmila, please do not hesitate. Ask us, and we will connect to whatever. What can I say, Chris? Do you have any other comments, please?
No, except that when we, starting next week, we're going to start our program at 1 p.m. And this is in the interest of allowing people who are in Ukraine and Russia, in Eastern Europe, to be able to join us earlier because of the time difference, primarily, but also anybody who is the Jewish faith who has holidays or anything going on the Sabbath, for example, on Friday afternoons, so they can have the time to do this a little bit earlier.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have been here for almost 2 hours, and I thank everyone who was listening, and it is amazing. Thank you. I hear comments here. Kateryna, a couple of words maybe?
Just a very deep thank you to all of our guests. I just wanted to wave goodbye to everyone. Just like every single person who spoke today absolutely like moved me to tears, and your stories are so different and so powerful. We're very, very blessed that we have connections with you. I want to reiterate what Dr. Fetz said. Whatever we can do to help, we will do it. We were able to ship many supplies into Poland that were driven into Ternopil and another village. We want to help. You are in our thoughts and prayers constantly. We're always thinking of you. I just wanted to just to kind of wave goodbye to everybody as we are wrapping up.
Yes.
I have something to say. Kateryna, you mentioned that you're going to go to Ternopil. It's a place where my son going to go. Do you have any contacts in Ternopil?
I can follow up with you on email. That is actually the city where my grandmother was born, and we actually have contacts in Ternopil. Oh my gosh! In fact, we do. We sent tons of medical supplies, tourniquets, blood clotting medicines to Ternopil a couple weeks ago. I will follow up with you through Dr. Fett, and thank you very much.
Wonderful. I need to. Of course, I have to end on the optimistic note. I'm a biologist, and this constant argument between scientists and humanitarians. And recently we decided with a friend that this is actually, maybe this is an argument between optimists and pessimists, humanitarians, of course, being optimists. But as old Russian joke says, pessimist is well-informed optimist. This is not what I want to believe. I want to believe that truth, good will prevail. And one thing we have hope for, that people finally are waking up because they are ashamed. It's not your grandfather's war. It's a war which everyone can see, atrocities and everything on your phone screen. And we serve right now, we all, with your help, probably serve informational service to everyone who wants to see and hear. And I wrote today to dozens of my friends all over the world. I want them in universities, on library platforms, to do what we are doing. Universities are places of learning. Libraries are hubs of information beyond individual departments, grants, and ambitions. Libraries, like they were in Middle Ages, you could move along Europe like refugees are doing right now, from Warsaw to Prague, from Italy to Austria, and be in the university setting with friends and like-minded people and get your information. Today it is digital and completely momentous. So I hope that others are doing what we are doing right now, and we want everyone to get connected in this possible way, exchange speakers, exchange ideas, and help the fight for humanity. Ukraine is the center of the planet right now. It will be the center of New World, New Jerusalem, if you wish. All world will come to help and reconstruct, rebuild. Glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine.
David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, one thing particularly that those of us in university communities should be starting to work on, I think. There are a good number of Ukrainian students all over the United States. Many of them are certainly suffering and anxious about their homes. Also, their own studies are undoubtedly being disrupted. How do you focus in these events? It seems to me that those of us who are academics should be reaching out to helping Ukrainians in the U.S. and in North America in general, students connect with one another, and as established academics in our own universities, providing support for these students. They are part of the future of Ukraine. Their country is going to needs them now, but also needs them to be able to to succeed in their studies as much as that's possible, and to be ready to make positive contributions towards the reconstruction of their country. So it seems to me that one of the things we as academics should be doing is helping students and our own institutions provide support for Ukrainians in North America. And I'm just hoping we can all figure out ways to do that. I'm working with our own International Studies Institute here, and we should be making those connections all over the country. For our Ukrainian students there's a level of support we should provide them so they're not having to think of these things. They've got more than enough on their minds right now. And that's something that those of us who care about Ukraine can do to step up.
Very good. Thank you, David. Any more comments? Thank you very much, everyone. It was amazing. April 8th in West Virginia. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, Boris. Thank you, Semyon. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ludmila, as well. You're in our thoughts.
Thank you. Danke.
Thank you for having us here. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, everybody else, for attending as well.
Thank you for your support. Thank you.
Спасибо. Слава Україні. Дякуємо всім.
Bye-bye. Героям слава.
Героям слава.